The dust storm had been raging for 3 days when I saw the ship. I was crouched in my makeshift shelter, watching the red dirt swirl outside through a crack in the metal walls. The wind howled like some angry beast, and I pulled my worn jacket tighter around my shoulders. Just another Tuesday on what used to be Earth. My name is Jake Miller, and I'm probably the last human alive. At least, I'm the only one left on this rock we used to call home. 3 years ago, the great dying started. First, the oceans turned black. Then the plants withered. The animals followed. Most people got off-planet if they could afford it, heading for the colonies on Mars or Europa. The rest of us? We stayed behind with the planet as it slowly choked to death. I survived because I'm stubborn and because I know how to fix things. When the water purifiers broke down, I fixed them. When the solar panels got buried under dust, I dug them out. When the hydroponic gardens failed, I jury-rigged new ones from spare parts. Day after day, week after week, month after month. Just me and the dying world. But even I couldn't fix everything forever. The ship that landed outside my shelter wasn't like anything I'd ever seen. It was huge, maybe the size of a city block, and it gleamed like liquid silver even through the dust storm. The hull was smooth as glass, with no visible seams or engines or windows. It just hung there in the air, about 10 feet off the ground, humming with some kind of energy that made my teeth ache. I grabbed my rifle from the corner of the shelter. Not that it would do much good against something that advanced, but it made me feel better. The storm was still howling, but I could see lights moving around the ship's surface, patterns that shifted and flowed like living things. Then a section of the hull just disappeared. Not opened, not slid away. Disappeared. And a figure stepped out. She was tall, maybe 7 feet, and she moved like she was walking on solid ground instead of floating in midair. The dust storm parted around her, creating a bubble of calm air. She wore what looked like a form-fitting suit made of the same silver material as her ship, and her skin had a faint blue tint that caught the light. But it was her face that stopped me cold. She was beautiful in a way that made my brain short-circuit. Her features were sharp and elegant, with high cheekbones and eyes that glowed like pale blue stars. Her hair was white as snow and moved like it was underwater, floating around her head in defiance of gravity. She looked right at my shelter, right at the crack I was peering through, and smiled. "Hello, Jake Miller," she said, and her voice reached me perfectly clear despite the storm. "My name is Princess Zara of the Valerian Empire. I have traveled 17 light years to find you, and we need to talk." I nearly dropped my rifle. She knew my name. She knew my name, and I'd never seen her before in my life. The section of hull reappeared behind her, and she glided down toward my shelter. The storm kept raging everywhere else, but around her it was perfectly calm. When she touched down in front of my door, I could hear her footsteps even through the howling wind. "May I come in?" she asked politely. "I know this must be quite shocking, but I assure you I mean no harm." I stared at the door for a long moment. What choice did I have? If she wanted to kill me, that ship of hers could probably glass my entire shelter from orbit. And honestly, after 3 years of talking to myself, even an alien visitor was better than no company at all. I unlatched the door and pulled it open. She stepped inside with fluid grace, and immediately my shelter felt tiny. She had to duck slightly to avoid hitting her head on the ceiling. And when she moved, that strange silver suit caught the light from my solar lanterns and threw it around the room in dancing patterns. "Thank you," she said, looking around at my humble home. I saw her take in the patched walls, the cobbled-together electronics, the neat stacks of salvaged supplies. "You have done remarkable work here, surviving alone on a dying world for 3 years. Most impressive. How do you know who I am?" I asked, not lowering the rifle. "How do you know how long I've been here?" She tilted her head, and her white hair shifted like liquid silk. "Because I have been watching you, Jake Miller. My people have been watching Earth for some time, documenting its decline. We catalog dying worlds, you see. It is our specialty. Your specialty? The Valerian Empire spans 47 star systems and encompasses over 200 habitable worlds, she said, as casually as someone might mention the weather. Many of those worlds were once dying, just like Earth. We saved them. She moved to my workbench where I had some old circuit boards spread out for repair. Her long fingers traced over the components with obvious appreciation. We saved them, she continued, and we saved their people. But Earth was written off as a total loss 3 years ago. The ecological collapse was too far advanced, the population too scattered across the galaxy to make planetary restoration cost-effective. My heart sank. I'd held on to hope that maybe, somehow, Earth could be fixed, that the people who'd left might come back someday. But then I found you, she said, turning to face me with those glowing eyes. One human, still alive, still fighting, still maintaining technology on a world that should be completely dead. Do you have any idea how extraordinary that is? I just know how to fix things, I said. It's what I do. Yes, she said, and her smile was brilliant. It is what you do, and it is exactly what I need. She gestured toward the door, where her ship waited in the storm. Jake Miller, I am worth approximately 400 billion Valerian credits. I own mining operations on 17 worlds, manufacturing facilities on 12 more, and a personal fleet of over 300 vessels. I can buy and sell entire solar systems. I blinked. Okay. And yet, she continued, there is one thing I cannot buy, one thing that all my wealth cannot purchase. She stepped closer, and I caught a scent like ozone and starlight. Ingenuity. True, desperate, life or death ingenuity. The kind that only comes from someone who has spent years alone, fighting to survive with nothing but scrap metal and determination. I don't understand. I am undertaking the greatest salvage operation in galactic history, she said. A world so damaged, so poisoned, so thoroughly destroyed that every expert in the Empire says it cannot be saved. A world where the oceans are acid, the atmosphere is toxic, and the very ground is cursed. She pulled out a device from somewhere in her suit, a small crystal that projected a hologram in the air between us. I saw a planet, brown and scarred, with swirling clouds of sickly yellow-green gas. This is Kareth Prime, she said, once the crown jewel of the Valerian Empire, home to 8 billion people and the most advanced civilization in our galaxy. 50 years ago, it was destroyed in a war. Not conquered, destroyed. Every living thing dead, every city in ruins, every ocean boiled away. The hologram shifted, showing closer views of the devastation. Twisted metal spires, cracked earth, skies the color of old blood. The Empire abandoned it, she continued, wrote it off as a dead loss just like Earth. But I know it can be saved. I have the resources, the technology, the wealth to make it happen. What I don't have is someone with the skills to make the impossible work. She dismissed the hologram and looked at me intently. I need someone who can take broken systems and make them run. Someone who can look at a handful of scrap and see the solution to an impossible problem. Someone who has already proven they can keep life going in a place where life should not exist. I set down my rifle. My hands were shaking slightly. You want to hire me? I want to offer you partnership, she corrected. Full partnership. Half of everything I make from restoring Kareth Prime will be yours. We are talking about wealth beyond imagining, Jake. Enough money to buy your own fleet, your own worlds, your own empire if you wish. And all I have to do is help you fix a dead planet. All you have to do, she said with a slight smile, is what you have been doing here for 3 years, except instead of working alone with salvaged parts, you will have unlimited resources, the most advanced technology in the galaxy, and teams of the best engineers money can buy working under your direction. I walked to the window and looked out at the storm. 3 years I'd been alone here. 3 years of talking to myself, of fixing the same broken systems over and over, of watching the world die a little more each day. I told myself I was preserving something, keeping the lights on for when people came back. But people weren't coming back. Earth was finished. Why me? I asked. You've got 47 star systems. You must have plenty of engineers. I have engineers who know how things are supposed to work, she said. What I need is someone who knows how to make things work when they're not supposed to. When you have the wrong parts, insufficient power, and systems that should have failed years ago. That kind of knowledge cannot be taught in schools or bought with money. It has to be lived. She moved to stand beside me at the window. Through the storm, I could see her ship waiting. My engineers look at Kareth Prime and see an impossible challenge, she said. They see problems too complex to solve, damage too extensive to repair. They see failure before they even begin. She looked at me. What do you see when you look at this shelter you have built? I thought about it. I see a leaky roof that needs patching, solar panels that need cleaning, and a water purifier that's going to break down next month if I can't find the right capacitor. Exactly, she said. You see problems to be solved, not reasons to give up. That is what I need. I was quiet for a long time. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the shelter it felt strangely peaceful. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't alone. What happens to Earth? I asked finally. Earth will be what it will be, she said sadly. I cannot save every world, but I can save one world, and in doing so, perhaps prevent the same fate from befalling others. And if I say no, then I will leave, and you will continue your lonely vigil here until your equipment finally fails or your supplies run out. She turned to face me fully. How long do you think you have left, Jake? Honestly, I'd been trying not to think about that. My best estimates gave me maybe 2 more years before something critical broke down that I couldn't fix. The hydroponic gardens were already showing signs of system failure, and my stockpile of spare parts was running low. Not long, I admitted. Then come with me, she said. Help me restore Kareth Prime. Give that dead world the same chance you have been giving Earth these past 3 years. What about Earth? If I leave, there won't be anyone left. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, there is a difference between honoring the dead and joining them. That hit me harder than I expected. I'd been thinking of myself as Earth's guardian, its last defender. But maybe I was really just its last prisoner. If I come with you, I said slowly, and we succeed in fixing Kareth Prime, what then? Then you will be the co-owner of the greatest restoration project in galactic history, she said. You will have wealth, influence, and the satisfaction of knowing you brought life back to a dead world. And from there, she shrugged gracefully. The galaxy is very large, Jake. There are many dead worlds that could use someone with your talents. The idea hit me like a lightning bolt. Not just fixing one dead planet, but many. Traveling from world to world, bringing life back to places that everyone else had written off. It was like what I'd been doing on Earth, but on a scale I'd never imagined. You're offering me a job as a professional world saver, I said. I am offering you the chance to do what you love, on the grandest possible scale, with unlimited resources. Her eyes sparkled. Though I should warn you, it will not be easy. Kareth Prime will make your work here look simple by comparison. I thought about my shelter, about the 3 years I'd spent keeping the lights on in an empty world. It had been meaningful work, but it had also been lonely work. And lonely was something I was getting very tired of. How long would the project take? I asked. Conservative estimates suggest 15 to 20 years for full planetary restoration, she said. Though with your expertise, perhaps we can do better. 20 years of challenging work with unlimited resources and the most advanced technology in the galaxy. 20 years of solving impossible problems and making the impossible work. 20 years of not being alone. I looked around my shelter one more time. 3 years of my life were in this place. 3 years of small victories against overwhelming odds, of refusing to give up when anyone sensible would have quit. It had been good work, important work. But it was finished now. Earth was finished. And maybe it was time for me to be finished with Earth. All right, I said. I'm in. Her smile could have powered my shelter for a month. Excellent. We should leave immediately. The journey to Kareth Prime will take approximately 6 weeks, which will give us time to review the planetary data and begin planning our approach. Give me 10 minutes to pack, I said. Take whatever you wish, she said. Though I should mention that your shelter and all of your innovations here will be studied and documented by my research teams. Your techniques for surviving on Earth may prove valuable for the Kareth Prime project. I started gathering my most important tools, the ones I'd modified and perfected over the years. My multimeter with the jury-rigged extended range. My welding torch with the custom gas mixture. The diagnostic scanner I'd built from 6 different broken devices. Jake, she said as I worked, I should tell you something else. I looked up from my packing. What? This is not just about Kareth Prime, she said. If we succeed there, if we prove that the impossible is merely difficult, it will change everything. The Empire currently abandons dozens of worlds every year, writing them off as total losses. But if we can demonstrate that any world can be saved, given enough resources and the right approach. You're talking about changing imperial policy, I said. I am talking about changing the galaxy, she said. No more dead worlds. No more abandoned populations. No more writing off entire civilizations as acceptable losses. The scope of what she was suggesting made my head spin. That's huge. Yes, she said simply. That is why I traveled 17 light years to find you. I finished packing my tools and took one last look around my shelter. It wasn't much to look at. Patched walls, cobbled together equipment, 3 years of making do with whatever I could find. But it had been home and it had been my life's work. Ready? She asked. I slung my tool bag over my shoulder and picked up my rifle. Ready. She gestured toward the door, and we stepped out into the storm. But as soon as we were within 10 feet of her, the wind died to nothing and the dust settled to the ground. It was like walking inside an invisible bubble of calm. How do you do that? I asked. Personal force field, she said casually. Standard equipment in the Empire. You will have one as well, once we reach my ship. The ship's hull opened as we approached, the section simply ceasing to exist just like before. Inside, the walls glowed with soft light, and the floor felt warm beneath my feet. Everything was smooth curves and flowing lines, like the inside of a seashell. Welcome aboard the Starfire, she said as the hull closed behind us. She is my personal vessel, and she will be our home for the next 6 weeks. The inside of the ship was incredible. Vast open spaces with impossibly high ceilings, gardens growing in chambers filled with golden light, viewing ports that showed the storm raging outside. And everywhere, that soft humming that I'd felt when the ship first landed, like the heartbeat of some vast mechanical creature. The storm, I said, looking out through one of the viewing ports. It's still going. We will wait for it to pass before departing, she said. No need to stress the atmospheric processors unnecessarily. She led me through corridors that curved and branched like the inside of a tree, past rooms filled with equipment I couldn't begin to identify, until we reached what she called the guest quarters. These will be your rooms, she said, opening a door that wasn't there until she touched the wall. Inside was a suite larger than my entire shelter, with a bed that looked like it was made of clouds, a workspace equipped with tools I'd only dreamed of, and windows that showed real-time views of space. This is too much, I said. It is exactly what you deserve, she said firmly. You are not my employee, Jake Miller. You are my partner, and partners are treated as equals. She left me to get settled, saying she would return when the storm passed and we were ready to depart. I spent the time exploring my new quarters, marveling at the advanced tools and equipment. The workbench alone probably cost more than every piece of salvaged equipment I'd ever owned. But it was the windows that really got to me. I could see Earth from space, that familiar blue marble I'd only seen in pictures before. Except now it wasn't blue anymore. It was brown and red and gray, with swirls of ugly clouds covering most of the surface. From up here, the death of the planet was even more obvious. I was still staring out at my dying home world when Princess Zara returned. "The storm has passed," she said. "We are ready to depart." "Just like that?" I asked. "No countdown, no preparation?" "The Starfire is always ready," she said with a smile. "Watch." The view outside changed so smoothly I almost didn't notice it at first. Earth grew smaller, shrinking from a planet to a marble to a point of light. The sun became just another star among thousands, and then millions. "We are now traveling at approximately 1/3 the speed of light," she said calmly. "We will reach Kareth Prime in 42 days. I sat down heavily in one of the impossibly comfortable chairs. 3 years of isolation on a dying world. And now I was traveling faster than light toward another dead planet with an alien princess who wanted to make me rich beyond imagining. "This is really happening," I said. "This is really happening," she agreed. "And Jake." "Yeah. Thank you for saying yes, for trusting me, for being willing to leave the only world you have ever known to help save one you have never seen." I looked out at the stars rushing past. Somewhere out there was Kareth Prime waiting for us, waiting to be brought back to life. "Thank you," I said, "for giving me something worth doing with the rest of my life." She smiled, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The dead planet behind us grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared entirely. The dead planet ahead of us waited in the darkness. And between them, 2 unlikely partners began planning the impossible. It was going to be the adventure of several lifetimes. The first thing that hit me about Kareth Prime was the smell. Even through the Starfire's atmospheric processors, even through the personal force field that Princess Zara had given me, there was something in the air that made my nose wrinkle. It was like burnt metal mixed with old death, a smell that seemed to cling to everything. "The atmosphere is technically breathable," Zara said as we stood in the ship's observation deck, looking down at the planet below. "But I would not recommend it for extended periods." I could see why. Kareth Prime looked like Earth's evil twin. Where Earth had been brown and dusty in its death, Kareth Prime was a palette of sickly yellows and greens. Massive storms churned across continents, and what should have been oceans were instead vast plains of cracked, crystallized salt. "Those storms," I said, pointing at a hurricane the size of Texas. "Are they always there?" "For the past 50 years, yes," she replied. "The planetary weather system was disrupted when the atmospheric processors were destroyed. The storms are actually one of our smaller problems." She activated a holographic display that showed the planet in cross-section. What I saw made my stomach drop. The core temperature was wrong, the magnetic field was fluctuating wildly, and there were massive gaps in the ozone layer that let in deadly radiation. "This is worse than I thought," I said. "Much worse," she agreed. "But that is why we are here." We'd spent the 6-week journey to Kareth Prime going over the data, and I'd learned more about planetary engineering than I'd ever wanted to know. Kareth Prime hadn't just died. It had been murdered. The war that destroyed it had been fought with weapons that poisoned the very ground, turned the oceans to acid, and cracked the planet's crust in a dozen places. "The good news," Zara continued, "is that we are not starting from nothing. There are still ruins of the old cities, some of the infrastructure is salvageable, and the planet's basic geology is sound. And the bad news? Everything else." She smiled grimly. "Shall we go down and take a look?" The shuttle ride to the surface was bumpy. The atmospheric disturbances made for rough flying, and I was grateful for the force field that kept me from being thrown around the cabin. Through the windows, I could see the landscape rushing past below, twisted metal structures, fields of glass where the sand had been melted, and everywhere the sickly green tinge of poisoned ground. We landed in what had once been the capital city of Kareth Prime. The ruins stretched to the horizon, a maze of broken towers and collapsed bridges. But what caught my attention were the work sites scattered throughout the ruins. Hundreds of them, each one swarming with activity. "Your engineering teams?" I asked. "The first wave," Zara said as we disembarked from the shuttle. "They have been here for 3 months, doing preliminary surveys and setting up base camps." The base camp was impressive. Temporary structures that looked like they could withstand a nuclear blast, power generators that hummed with barely contained energy, and equipment that made my tools from Earth look like stone knives. But it was the people that really got my attention. There were dozens of them, all different species I'd never seen before. Some were tall and thin like Zara, others were short and stocky with 4 arms, and a few looked almost human except for the scales and the extra eyes. They all wore the same silver suits, and they all looked up when we approached. "Everyone," Zara called out, "I would like you to meet Jake Miller, our new partner and chief of operations." The reaction was immediate and not entirely positive. I heard muttering in languages I didn't recognize, and several of the engineers exchanged looks that didn't seem friendly. A tall, 4-armed creature stepped forward. His silver suit was decorated with symbols I assumed were rank insignia, and his expression was skeptical. "Your Highness," he said in accented English. "With respect, we have been making good progress without outside assistance. Are you certain this human is necessary?" "Chief Engineer Vex," Zara said calmly. "Jake Miller has spent 3 years keeping complex systems operational on a dying world with minimal resources. I believe his expertise will be invaluable." Vex looked me up and down, taking in my worn clothes and battered tool bag. "Respectfully, Your Highness, we are not dealing with primitive human technology here. This project requires advanced engineering knowledge that takes decades to acquire." I felt my temper flare, but before I could say anything, Zara held up a hand. "Perhaps," she said, "a demonstration would be in order." "Vex, what is our most pressing current problem?" The chief engineer's expression darkened. "The atmospheric processors. We have been trying to get them online for 2 months, but there are cascading system failures throughout the network. Every time we fix one problem, 3 more appear." "Show us," Zara said. Vex led us through the ruins to a massive structure that looked like a cross between a factory and a cathedral. It was easily the size of a city block, with towers that reached up into the poisoned sky and pipes that snaked away in all directions. "This is Atmospheric Processor Station 7, Vex explained as we walked through the main entrance. One of 12 such stations built around the planet. If we can get even half of them operational, we can begin to clear the atmospheric toxins. Inside, the station was a maze of corridors and chambers filled with machinery that boggled the mind. Pipes as wide as subway tunnels carried strange fluids, and control panels covered in alien symbols flickered with warning lights. "The basic principle is sound," Vex continued, leading us to a central control room. "The processors extract toxins from the atmosphere, break them down at the molecular level, and release clean air. But the control systems are completely corrupted." He activated a holographic display that showed the station's status. It was a sea of red warning indicators and error messages. "We have replaced every major component," he said with frustration. "New processors, new filters, new control computers. But nothing works. The system runs for a few hours, then crashes completely." I studied the display for a moment, then walked over to one of the control panels. The interface was alien, but the underlying logic was familiar. Systems were systems, no matter who built them. "Can you show me the power distribution?" I asked. Vex looked surprised but complied. A new display appeared, showing the power grid for the entire station. "There," I said, pointing to a section of the grid. "You've got a feedback loop." "Impossible," Vex said immediately. "We checked the power systems thoroughly. All connections are secure." "Not the connections," I said. The timing. Look at the power draw from sections 4 and 7. They're pulling power at exactly the same intervals, creating a resonance cascade that's overloading the primary regulators. Vex stared at the display, his 4 arms working frantically at the controls. After a moment, his expression changed from skepticism to amazement. You are correct, he said quietly. The timing synchronization is causing harmonic interference. But how did you see that so quickly? Because I've dealt with this exact problem before, I said. I had a similar issue with the power grid in my shelter on Earth. Different technology, same underlying physics. I pulled out my multimeter and started checking connections. The interface was alien, but electricity was electricity. Within an hour, I'd identified and fixed the synchronization issue. The station's status display shifted from red to amber to green. Atmospheric Processor Station 7 is now online. The computer announced in a pleasant voice. The reaction from the engineering team was immediate. Cheers erupted from the control room, and several of the engineers clapped me on the back. Even Vex seemed impressed. Remarkable, he said. We had been working on this problem for 2 months. Sometimes you need fresh eyes, I said. And sometimes you need someone who's used to working with broken systems. Over the next few days, I worked with the engineering teams to diagnose and fix problems throughout the base camp. The issues were complex, but the solutions were often simple once you understood the underlying patterns. A water purification system that kept failing because of mineral buildup. A power generator that was overheating because of inadequate cooling. A communications array that was picking up interference from the planet's unstable magnetic field. Each problem I solved earned me more respect from the team. They started coming to me with their toughest challenges, and I found myself working 18-hour days just to keep up with the demand. You are becoming quite popular, Zara observed one evening as we shared dinner in her private quarters aboard the Starfire. Chief Engineer Vex tells me you have solved more problems in 1 week than his team managed in 3 months. They're good engineers, I said. They just think too much like engineers. Meaning, they assume that advanced technology should work perfectly, I explained. But technology is technology. It breaks down, it gets dirty, it develops quirks. The more advanced it is, the more ways it can fail. She laughed. So your years of working with broken systems on Earth have prepared you for working with advanced systems on Kareth Prime. Broken is broken, I said. Whether it's a jury-rigged solar panel or a planetary atmospheric processor. Speaking of which, she said, I have some news. The Empire has taken notice of our progress here. I felt a chill run down my spine. Good notice or bad notice? Both, she said. The Imperial Council is impressed by our rapid progress. They are considering expanding funding for the project. That's the good news. What's the bad news? They are also sending an inspection team to evaluate our methods, she said, led by Imperial Engineer Thex9, who is not particularly fond of unorthodox approaches. Meaning he's not going to like me. Meaning he is going to do everything in his power to shut down this project and prove that Kareth Prime cannot be saved, she said grimly. He has been arguing for years that the Empire wastes too much money on restoration projects. When does he arrive? 3 days. I felt my stomach tighten. 3 days to prepare for an inspection that could shut down the entire project. 3 days to prove that an Earth scavenger belonged on the biggest engineering project in galactic history. What do we need to do? I asked. We need to show them results, she said. Real, measurable progress that cannot be dismissed or explained away. How many atmospheric processors do we have online now? 4 out of 12, she said. Not enough to make a significant impact on the planetary atmosphere, but enough to show that the concept works. What about the other systems? Water purification, soil treatment, the magnetic field stabilizers. All still in the planning stages, she admitted. The atmospheric processors were supposed to be the easy part. I was quiet for a moment, thinking. The inspection team would be looking for reasons to shut us down, which meant we needed to give them something so impressive they couldn't ignore it. What if we could get all 12 processors online before they arrive? I asked. Impossible, she said immediately. The remaining 8 stations are in even worse condition than the first 4. Some of them are barely standing. But if we could do it, I pressed. If we could show them a functioning planetary atmospheric grid, would that be enough? She leaned forward, her glowing eyes intense. Jake, if we could get all 12 processors online and working in coordination, it would be the most significant engineering achievement in Imperial history. But the time frame is impossible. We would need to repair 8 stations in 3 days. Not repair, I said. Jury-rig. I do not understand. The Empire engineers think in terms of perfect solutions, I explained. They want to rebuild everything from scratch, make it all work exactly as designed. But what if we don't need perfect? What if we just need functional? I pulled out my tablet and started sketching. Look, each atmospheric processor is designed to work independently. But if we network them together, use the working stations to compensate for the broken ones, we might be able to get the whole system operational even if half the individual stations are running on duct tape and prayer. Duct tape and prayer? Earth expression. It means holding things together with whatever you have on hand and hoping for the best. She studied my sketches for a long moment. This is completely against Imperial engineering protocols. Will it work? It might, she said slowly. But if it fails during the inspection, then we're no worse off than we are now, I said. But if it works, we prove that this project is viable and that Kareth Prime can be saved. She was quiet for a long time, staring at my rough diagrams. Finally, she looked up at me. You are asking me to bet everything on an approach that no Imperial engineer would ever attempt. I'm asking you to bet everything on what I do best, I said. Making impossible things work. She smiled, and I could see the moment she made her decision. Very well, she said. We have 3 days to perform a miracle. Let us see what Earth ingenuity can accomplish. The next 3 days were the most intense of my life. We worked around the clock, teams of engineers swarming over each atmospheric processor station. I couldn't be everywhere at once, so I trained the team leaders in what I called creative problem solving, finding ways to make systems work even when they shouldn't. Station 8 had a collapsed main chamber, so we rerouted the atmospheric flow through the maintenance tunnels. Station 9 had a corrupted control computer, so we bypassed it entirely and ran the station manually. Station 11 had been hit by lightning and half the systems were fried, so we cannibalized parts from the other stations to build a hybrid that could handle the load. Each solution was ugly, improvised, and violated about a dozen Imperial engineering standards. But they worked. By the end of the 3rd day, we had all 12 atmospheric processors online and networked together. The system was running on a combination of advanced Imperial technology and Earth-style jury-rigging that would have given any engineering professor nightmares. But the air was getting cleaner. Imperial transport approaching, announced the communications officer. ETA 10 minutes. I stood in the main control room, watching the displays that showed the status of all 12 processors. Green lights across the board, atmospheric toxin levels dropping steadily, and the first clear sky anyone had seen on Kareth Prime in 50 years. Nervous? Zara asked, coming to stand beside me. Terrified, I admitted, but also excited. We did something amazing here. We did, she agreed. Whatever happens next, we proved that Kareth Prime can be saved. The Imperial inspection team arrived in a ship that made the Starfire look like a rowboat. It was massive, all angles and armor plating, and it landed with the subtlety of a falling mountain. Imperial Engineer Thex 9 was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, thin, with the bearing of someone who'd never been wrong about anything in his life. He wore a uniform covered in medals and insignia, and he looked at our base camp like he was inspecting a sewage treatment plant. Your Highness, he said to Zara with a bow that was technically respectful but clearly grudging. I am here to evaluate the progress of your project. Of course, Zara replied smoothly. We are honored by your visit. Perhaps you would like to see our results. She led the inspection team to the main control room, where the atmospheric grid display showed all 12 processors running in perfect coordination. Impressive, Thex9 said, though his tone suggested he was anything but impressed. And how long have these systems been operational? The full grid has been online for 72 hours, Zara said. 72 hours? Thex9's expression sharpened. That seems remarkably fast, considering the condition of the infrastructure. We employed some innovative solutions, Zara said carefully. I see. Thex9 turned to me. And you are the human I have heard about, the one responsible for these innovative solutions. Jake Miller? I said, extending my hand. He looked at it like I was offering him a dead fish. Tell me, Mr. Miller, he said, what is your formal training in atmospheric engineering? I don't have any, I said. I'm a repair technician. A repair technician. He made it sound like a disease. And you believe you are qualified to work on imperial-level planetary engineering projects? I believe I'm qualified to make things work, I said. That's what I do. We shall see, he said coldly. I would like to inspect these atmospheric processors personally, starting with Station 8. My heart sank. Station 8 was the one with the collapse chamber, where we'd rerouted everything through the maintenance tunnels. It was functional, but it looked like it had been assembled by drunken monkeys. The inspection of Station 8 was even worse than I'd feared. Thex9 took one look at our improvised routing system and nearly had a stroke. This is completely against Imperial engineering protocols, he said, his voice rising. You have bypassed primary safety systems, overloaded secondary conduits, and created at least 17 different points of failure. But it works, I said. It works. He turned on me, his face flushed with anger. Mr. Miller, this is not some primitive human technology that can be held together with hope and good intentions. This is a planetary atmospheric processor, capable of affecting the lives of billions of people. One failure in your improvised system could poison the entire continent. The system has multiple redundancies, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. If any one component fails, the others can compensate. Your redundancies are jury-rigged patches that violate every Imperial safety standard, he snapped. This entire project is a disaster waiting to happen. He spent the next hour documenting every improvised solution, every bypass safety system, every violation of Imperial engineering standards. By the time he was done, he had enough material to shut down the project permanently. Your Highness, he said to Zara as we returned to the base camp, I am recommending immediate suspension of this project pending a full Imperial review. On what grounds? She asked. On the grounds that your methods are unsafe, your personnel are unqualified, and your results are unsustainable, he said. This human may have managed to create the illusion of progress, but he has done so by cutting corners and ignoring safety protocols. It is only a matter of time before the entire system fails catastrophically. The system has been stable for 72 hours, Zara pointed out. 72 hours is nothing, he said dismissively. Let me see it run for 72 days without a major failure, and perhaps I will be impressed. He was preparing to leave when the alarm went off. Atmospheric disturbance detected, announced the computer. All personnel to emergency stations. Through the windows of the control room, I could see the sky darkening. One of Kareth Prime's massive storms was forming directly overhead, and it was growing fast. Perfect, Thex9 said with satisfaction. Your first real test, and it comes just as I predicted. The storm that hit us was unlike anything I'd ever experienced on Earth. Winds that could tear apart buildings, lightning that could melt steel, and atmospheric pressure changes that made your ears pop. the kind of storm that had been raging on Kareth Prime for 50 years. Processors are holding steady, Chief Engineer Vex reported from the control station. No significant fluctuations in the atmospheric grid. Wait for it, Vex-9 said confidently. These storms create electromagnetic pulses that will overload any inadequately shielded system. He was right. Within minutes, the first warnings started appearing on the displays. Processors 6 and 9 were showing signs of electrical interference. Processor 4 was reporting cooling system failures. And Processor 8, our most heavily modified station, was experiencing what the computer politely called cascading system anomalies. There, Vex-9 said triumphantly, your improvised systems are failing exactly as I predicted. But I was already at the control station, working with Vex to reroute power and compensate for the failing systems. The beauty of our networked approach was that we didn't need every processor to work perfectly. We just needed the grid as a whole to function. Redistributing load to processors 1, 2, and 7, I called out. Switching processor 8 to backup mode. Processor 6 is back online, Vex reported. Cooling systems restored on processor 4. Impossible, Vex-9 muttered. The electromagnetic interference should have crashed the entire grid. Not if you design for it, I said, my hands flying over the controls. On Earth, we get storms too. The trick is to build systems that can handle the worst-case scenario. But you did not build these systems, he protested. You merely modified them. Same principle, I said. Expect the worst, plan for failure, and always have a backup plan. The storm raged for 3 hours. During that time, we lost individual processors 6 different times, but the grid never went down. Each time a station failed, the others picked up the slack. Each time the electromagnetic interference spiked, our improvisations absorbed the load. When the storm finally passed, all 12 processors were still online. The atmospheric toxin levels were actually lower than they'd been before the storm hit. Remarkable, Vex-9 said quietly. He was staring at the displays with something that might have been respect. Your system not only survived the storm, it continued to function throughout. That's the point, I said. Imperial engineering builds systems that work perfectly under ideal conditions. Earth engineering builds systems that work well enough under terrible conditions. And which approach is more suitable for a world like Kareth Prime? Zara asked pointedly. Vex-9 was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he turned to me. Mr. Miller, he said, I owe you an apology. Your methods may be unorthodox, but your results are undeniable. Thank you, I said. I will be recommending that this project continue, he said to Zara. Furthermore, I will be suggesting that the Empire study your techniques for possible application to other restoration projects. Other restoration projects? I asked. The Empire has hundreds of damaged worlds, he explained. Most of them are considered beyond saving using conventional methods. But if your approach proves viable, he trailed off, but I could see the implications in his eyes. After the inspection team left, Zara and I stood in the observation deck of the Starfire, looking down at Kareth Prime. The sky was clearer than it had been in 50 years, and for the first time since we'd arrived, I could see patches of blue through the clouds. So, she said, are you ready for the next phase? What's the next phase? Water purification, soil treatment, magnetic field stabilization, and ecosystem restoration, she said. Plus setting up similar projects on 17 other worlds. 17 other worlds? The Empire has approved funding for a comprehensive restoration program, she said with a smile. Based on the success of your methods here, they want to establish restoration teams on every damaged world in Imperial space. I felt my head spinning. And they want me to. They want you to lead the program, she said. Chief of Restoration Operations for the entire Valerian Empire. Your own fleet, unlimited resources, and the authority to implement whatever methods you deem necessary. I looked down at Kareth Prime, at the world we were slowly bringing back to life. 3 months ago, I'd been alone on a dead planet, keeping broken systems running with salvaged parts. Now I was being offered the chance to restore entire worlds. There's just one condition, Zara added. What's that? You have to take me with you, she said. This is my project too, and I want to see it through to the end. I smiled. I wouldn't want to do it without you. Good, she said, because we have a lot of dead worlds to save. I looked out at the stars, at the vast galaxy full of broken worlds and impossible challenges. Somewhere out there were 17 planets waiting for someone to prove that the impossible was just another word for difficult. When do we start? I asked. We already have, she said. Welcome to the rest of your life, Jake Miller. And for the first time since leaving Earth, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged.